is hot and mighty bright. Let's get down to business and get home tonight. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal Ross, she'll do for a start. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in. Now here's a real good vibe, about 15. Her great-grandmammy was a Dahomey queen. Just look at her face, she sure ain't homely. Like it says in the Bible, she's black but comely. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in. She's good in the fields, can sew and cook. Strip her down, Roy, let the gentleman look. She's full in front and ample behind. Examine her teeth if you got a mind. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in. I'm gonna start at 3. Can I hear 3? Step up here, chance, take a good look, see, because I know you're going to want her once you see her. She's young and right, make a darn good breeder. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in. 350 is the bid. Can I hear 4? At 400 pounds, she's a bargain sure. 400 pounds, 455. At 500 pounds now, look alive. Don't mind them tears, that's one of her tricks. 550 is the bid. Can I hear 6? She's healthy and strong and well equipped. Make a fine lady's maid, which is properly whipped. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in. 650, don't be slow. At 700 pounds, I'm gonna let her go. At 7, she's going, gone. Pull her down, Roy, bring the next one on. Bid 'em in, get 'em in, bid 'em in. One day my dad and I are riding through Colonial Williamsburg. I was born in Williamsburg, born in a town not far from Williamsburg, but when I was a year old, we moved to Williamsburg proper. We're riding down the street, and I'm looking at the colonial capital, and I remember passing by and seeing all those people out there. And I passed by it several times because you can't go to East Williamsburg or West Williamsburg without going through the town of Williamsburg. And as I'm passing by, I said to my dad, why is it that we never go to Williamsburg to visit? He said, that's a place that points to slavery, and we don't need to know about that. Well, if Daddy said it, that's the end of it. I would graduate from college. I'd go to graduate school. I'd come back to Hampton University before one day in the speech communications and theater arts department where I was working, a young man comes from Colonial Williamsburg and says he wants some of our actors at Hampton University to audition to play the parts of slaves at Colonial Williamsburg. You don't go to a predominantly black college and make a statement like that unless you are 5 beers short of a 6-pack or your cause is just. He said, we don't want any Stephen Fetchers, we don't want any Butterfly McQueens, but we want to begin talking about the other half of the population in Williamsburg during the 18th century. He said the other half of the population in Williamsburg during the 18th century. When he said that, I said, oh, if you're going to do something positive for black folk in Williamsburg, I'll audition for you. Fool that I was. That began a career that focused on a subject nobody wanted to talk about, especially the folk at Colonial Williamsburg who had just hired me. In Williamsburg, and then at the Smithsonian, and then back at Williamsburg, and it's a long trajectory and a long story. But I knew very early on, if I had not found a way to discuss and talk about, you hear that ringing, don't you? Because I hear it too. Can you turn the volume down just a little bit, young man, so that ringing is not there? Testing, 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 testing. That's much better. Can you still hear me? Okay, much better. Thank you. And so it was this need to talk to the million or so folk who were coming to Williamsburg at that time, don't we miss those times, at that time, who were saying, I don't need to know about this other half of the population, and me feeling the need to in some way convince them that yes, they do. Because if half the population in Williamsburg was black and they didn't know anything about it, then they were missing half of the history. And so that began this trick. So as we began to talk about the unmentionable and to talk about it with elementary and middle school and high schoolers and adults, finding a way to talk about it and doing that in a way that sort of enlightened people and allowed them to open themselves up and connect and engage rather than pushing themselves away and disconnecting was a challenge that we faced every day. And Colonial Williamsburg still faces that challenge, even though they do it very, very well and have done it well for this year, as a matter of fact, is the 30th anniversary of the first time that they began interpreting African American history at Colonial Williamsburg. So that at least is what my motivation was, assuming that there was something I might be able to share with you that you might be able to use either in your own institutions or as you consider exhibitions or as you consider things that you do in your own spaces and places. So my objective is simply to demonstrate the power of primary documents, to in some way give you some idea of why I think they're important and how I think they're important and demonstrate that importance this afternoon. So this won't be a session where I talk to you as much as a session where we talk to one another and we interact and engage together. So here's my agenda. I want to try our hand at interpreting 3 primary documents. So I'm going to need 3 volunteers to come up here and help read these primary documents. And there are only 3 of them. But I think the 3 provide us with a continuum of possibility that becomes very important as you begin to look at this whole institution of slavery and ask yourself, how might I back into it, or how might I walk into it, or how might I begin to think about it from a perspective that would allow audiences to engage rather than assume they know all they need to know and therefore disengage. And I want to show how I think primary documents can do that. Much of this will relate to the experience that we have together, to the dynamics of this group, to the connections that are made with the documents themselves, to the way that the engagement takes place. And let me tell you, one of the things I'm going to do, as we begin to talk about this, I'm going to go out into the audience and I make sure I put some lotion on my hands and I wash my hands. But I'm going to come out into the audience, and if you're not, unless you're in the center there and you have no defense at all, but he does because I can't get to him. But I'm going to come out into the audience and I might touch you. I've washed my hands, I've had all my shots, but I just might touch you on your shoulder, especially if you're saying something that is particularly salient in terms of these documents. So I might do that. If you see me running up towards you, it's not because I want to tackle you because I just come from the football exhibition. It's simply because I want to connect in some way, shape, or form to you. You also might find me in some way creating some sort of witticism. You might find me saying something that might even be funny. Here's my take on that. We're talking about something that's very serious, but learning does not have to be painful. And so as we begin to talk about this very serious subject, I will begin to talk about it in ways that you might think, oh, he's being too flip here. No, I'm not. But if we want to learn from history, we must find ways to engage, ways to break down barriers of communication. And hopefully, as you watch all of this, as you see the primary documents, as you hear them being read, as we begin to engage and interact together, some ideas will come into your mind about ways that you might be able to in some way engage in this subject that I think is a very, very worthy subject to engage in. Questions that I'd like for you to ponder. Who are the significant people in the lives of the characters you will be introduced? Now, we're going to be talking this afternoon in several perspectives. We're going to talk about what we know. We're going to talk about what we assume. And we're going to talk about why it matters. What we know, what we assume, and why it matters. Why have the discussion at all?